Elena's knees hurt. They always hurt these days, especially after spending 6 hours scrubbing the white marble floors of the Thornbury Hotel. The fancy kind of marble that showed every speck of dust, every footprint, every tiny imperfection. The kind that rich people loved because it looked expensive, and people like her hated because it meant getting down on your hands and knees twice a day to keep it shining. She dipped her brush into the bucket of soapy water and kept working. Around her, hotel guests walked past in their designer shoes and perfect clothes. They talked loudly on their phones about business deals and vacation plans. Not one of them looked down. Not one of them saw her. After 12 years of cleaning hotels, Elena had gotten used to being invisible. "Hey, ghost. You missed a spot over there." Elena looked up to see Dorothy, the head housekeeper, pointing at a corner she'd already cleaned 3 times. Dorothy was standing with 2 other maids, Linda and Rose, and all 3 of them were smirking. They did this every day, found reasons to criticize her, to make her redo work, to remind her that she was at the bottom of the ladder. "I cleaned that area already," Elena said quietly, her accent still thick after all these years in America. "Well, clean it again," Dorothy snapped. "And this time do it right. Or maybe you're too old to see properly anymore." The other maids giggled. Elena was 42, but her hands looked older. Years of harsh chemicals and hard work had left them rough and scarred. Her uniform was clean but faded, stitched up in places where it had torn. She couldn't afford a new one, not when she was sending money back home to her mother in Ukraine. Elena picked up her brush and moved to the corner Dorothy had pointed at. She didn't argue. She never argued. What was the point? She needed this job. She needed every dollar she earned. "God, she's so pathetic," she heard Linda whisper, loud enough for her to hear. "Doesn't even fight back." Elena kept her eyes on the floor and scrubbed. She'd learned long ago that silence was easier than fighting. Words couldn't hurt you if you didn't let them in. At least that's what she told herself every night when she lay in her tiny apartment, alone with her thoughts. The morning shift dragged on. Elena cleaned 3 guest bathrooms, vacuumed 2 hallways, and helped carry fresh linens to the 4th floor. During lunch break, the other staff gathered in the break room, laughing and sharing food. Elena took her sandwich and slipped away like she always did. She had a secret spot, a place where no one bothered her. The hotel had a grand ballroom on the 2nd floor, the kind used for weddings and fancy parties. When there were no events scheduled, it sat empty and quiet. Elena had discovered that the door was often unlocked during the day, and she'd started spending her lunch breaks there, sitting in one of the chairs at the back, eating her simple sandwich in peace. But it wasn't the quiet she came for. Not really. It was the piano. Right in the center of the ballroom, sitting on the polished wooden stage like a beautiful black jewel, was a Steinway grand piano. Elena knew the brand because she knew pianos the way some people knew cars or wine. This one was worth more than she'd earned in 10 years of cleaning floors. She never touched it. She just looked at it. Sometimes, if she closed her eyes, she could hear music in her head. Complex, beautiful music that made her heart ache with a pain so deep she could barely breathe. Today, she sat in her usual chair and unwrapped her sandwich. Peanut butter and jelly, the same thing she ate every day because it was cheap. As she chewed, she stared at the piano and hummed softly under her breath. A melody from another life, a life that felt like it had belonged to someone else. "You like piano music?" Elena jumped, nearly dropping her sandwich. She turned to see Mr. Chen, one of the hotel's oldest bellhops, standing in the doorway. He was smiling kindly. "Sorry, I didn't mean to scare you," he said, walking in. "I was just passing by and heard you humming." "That's Rachmaninoff, isn't it?" Elena felt her face grow hot. Yes, I just like the melody." "You have good taste," Mr. Chen said. "My daughter used to play piano. She was pretty good, but nothing like the professionals. Do you play?" Elena shook her head quickly. "No, I just like to listen." It wasn't exactly a lie. She didn't play anymore. Hadn't touched a piano in 15 years. That part of her life was dead and buried, along with everything else she'd lost. Mr. Chen nodded and left her alone. Elena finished her sandwich quickly, her hands shaking slightly. She didn't like talking about music. It opened doors in her mind that she'd worked hard to keep locked. The afternoon was worse than the morning. Dorothy assigned her to clean the staff bathrooms, the worst job because they were always disgusting. Then she had to scrub the kitchen floors after the dinner service, getting yelled at by the chef when she accidentally bumped a cart. By 8 p.m., when her shift finally ended, Elena's whole body ached. She changed out of her uniform in the staff locker room, moving slowly. The other maids had already left, their lockers decorated with photos and magnets and little personal touches. Elena's locker was bare except for a small photograph taped inside the door. She stared at it for a long moment before closing the locker. In the photo, a young woman in a glittering silver gown stood on a concert stage, a spotlight shining down on her. Her hair was dark and glossy, her face unlined and bright with joy. She looked nothing like the tired, gray-haired woman Elena saw in the mirror every day, but it was her. Or had been her once upon a time. Elena left the hotel through the staff entrance and started the long walk to the bus stop. She couldn't afford to take the bus both ways, so she walked home every night to save money. It took 40 minutes, but she didn't mind. The night air was cool and the darkness felt safe somehow. As she walked, she started humming again. That same melody from lunch. It filled her head, demanding to be heard, demanding to be played. Her fingers twitched at her sides, remembering patterns they hadn't played in over a decade. By the time she reached her apartment building, Elena had made a decision. A crazy, reckless decision that went against every survival instinct she'd developed over the years. She was going to play that piano. Just once, just to see if her hands still remembered. Just to know if that part of her was truly dead or if it had just been sleeping all this time. The decision terrified her. But it also made her feel alive for the first time in 15 years. 3 days passed and Elena couldn't stop thinking about the piano. Every time she mopped a floor or changed a bedsheet, her mind wandered back to that gleaming Steinway in the ballroom. Her fingers kept twitching, trying to remember patterns and movements they hadn't made in years. But she was scared. What if she'd forgotten everything? What if her hands were too stiff now, too damaged from years of cleaning? What if the magic was gone? Meanwhile, things at work got worse. It started on Tuesday morning when Elena arrived for her shift. She opened her locker and found her spare uniform soaked in something that smelled like bleach. The fabric was spotted and discolored, completely ruined. Oh no, how did that happen? Dorothy's voice came from behind her, dripping with fake concern. Someone must have left a bottle of cleaning solution in your locker by accident. Elena turned to see Dorothy standing there with Linda and Rose, all three of them barely hiding their smiles. The bottle of bleach sat on the floor near Elena's locker, tipped over and empty. That was my only other uniform, Elena said quietly. Well, you should be more careful where you keep things, Dorothy said, shrugging. I guess you'll have to wear that one until you can afford a new one. Elena looked down at the uniform she was wearing. It was the one with patches on the elbows and a small tear near the pocket that she'd stitched up herself. Now it was the only one she had. The other maids walked away laughing. Elena carefully hung up the ruined uniform, hoping maybe she could salvage it somehow. But she knew the truth. On her salary, a new uniform would cost nearly a week's worth of groceries. She'd have to make do. During her morning rounds, Elena noticed Mr. Thornberry, the hotel owner, walking through the lobby. He rarely showed up in person. Usually he managed things from his office downtown. He was younger than she expected, maybe in his late 40s, with gray starting to show in his dark hair. He walked with purpose, talking on his phone, his expensive suit perfectly pressed. He passed right by her without looking. Just another invisible maid. Lunchtime came and Elena grabbed her sandwich and headed for the ballroom. But when she got there, Dorothy was waiting by the door with her arms crossed. Where do you think you're going? Dorothy asked. I eat lunch in there sometimes, Elena said. When it's empty. Not anymore. Staff aren't allowed in the ballroom unless they're working an event. New policy. Dorothy smiled coldly. You can eat in the break room like everyone else. Elena knew this wasn't a real policy. Dorothy was just finding new ways to make her miserable. But what could she do? She nodded and turned away, heading back toward the staff areas. The break room was full of people. Elena stood in the doorway for a moment, then decided she'd rather eat in the bathroom than face the stares and whispers. She ended up sitting on a bench in the service hallway, eating her sandwich alone while delivery people walked past. That afternoon, while Elena was cleaning one of the VIP suites, her locker key fell out of her pocket. She didn't notice until an hour later. When she went back to search for it, the key was gone. And when she finally got maintenance to open her locker at the end of her shift, she discovered that someone had been through her things. Nothing valuable was missing because she didn't keep anything valuable at work, but her belongings had been moved around, touched. And worst of all, the photograph she kept taped inside the door, the one of her younger self on the concert stage, was gone. Elena's hands shook as she searched through her locker, hoping maybe it had just fallen. But it was nowhere. Someone had taken it. She walked home that night feeling hollow inside. That photo was one of only 3 pictures she had from her old life. The others were hidden in her apartment, too precious to risk bringing to work. But that one had been special. It was from the night she'd played at Royal Festival Hall in London, one of the happiest nights of her life, back when she still believed in happiness. The next day, everything became clear. Elena was pushing her cleaning cart down the 3rd-floor hallway when she heard laughter coming from the break room. She recognized the voices, Dorothy, Linda, and Rose, and they were talking about her. "I can't believe she kept this picture in her locker," Linda was saying. "Does she think she's this woman or something?" "Maybe she dreams about being rich and famous," Rose said. "Poor little ghost stuck cleaning toilets while she fantasizes about wearing fancy dresses." Elena's heart sank. They had her photograph. They were mocking her with it. She wanted to storm in there and take it back, to tell them the truth, to show them they were wrong. But the words stuck in her throat. What would she even say? Would they even believe her? And if they did, would that make things better or worse? Instead, Elena turned her cart around and walked away. She spent the rest of the day in a fog, barely aware of what she was cleaning or where she was going. During her lunch break, she tried to go back to the ballroom, but Dorothy had actually gotten security to lock the door. Elena stood outside it for a long moment, her hand on the handle, feeling something break inside her chest. That evening, after her shift ended, Elena didn't go home. She wandered the hotel's service corridors, avoiding people, trying to figure out what to do. She found herself on the 2nd floor near the ballroom. The evening shift security guard, a kind older man named Tony, was making his rounds. "You okay, Elena?" he asked. "You look upset." "I'm fine," she said automatically. Then, before she could stop herself, she asked, "Tony, does the ballroom really have a new policy about staff not being allowed inside?" Tony frowned. "What policy?" "There's no policy like that. As long as there's no event scheduled and you're on your break, I don't see why anyone would care." Elena nodded slowly. So Dorothy had been lying, just like she suspected. "Why do you ask?" Tony said. "No reason." "Thank you, Tony." He smiled and continued his rounds. Elena stood there in the quiet hallway, listening to his footsteps fade away. Then she looked at the ballroom doors. Through the small windows she could see the stage, the piano waiting in the darkness. She thought about her photograph, now a source of mockery in the break room. She thought about her ruined uniform, her aching hands, the way Dorothy and the others treated her like she was nothing, like she'd always been nothing. Something hardened in Elena's chest, a feeling she hadn't felt in 15 years. Not quite anger, not quite courage, something in between. She made her decision right there in that hallway. She would play that piano, not someday, not when she felt ready. Tonight. If they were going to treat her like a ghost, she'd show them what ghosts could do. She'd play one more time just for herself, to prove that part of her wasn't dead, that she'd been someone once even if no one here would ever know it. Elena checked her watch. It was almost midnight. In 2 hours, when Tony finished his rounds and the night staff were all busy on other floors, she would use her master key to enter the ballroom, and she would play. Elena waited in the janitor's closet on the 2nd floor, watching the minutes tick by on her old watch. Her heart pounded so hard she could hear it in her ears. She'd never done anything like this before. 15 years of following rules, keeping her head down, staying invisible. And now she was about to break into the ballroom in the middle of the night. At 2:15 a.m., she heard Tony's footsteps pass by, heading toward the east wing for his final round. The night desk clerk would be dozing at the front desk. The kitchen staff would be finishing cleanup. No one would be near the ballroom for at least 30 minutes. Elena stepped out of the closet, her master key clutched in her trembling hand. The hallway was dim, lit only by emergency lights. Her footsteps made no sound on the carpet as she approached the ballroom doors. She slid the key into the lock. It turned with a soft click that sounded impossibly loud in the silence. Elena pushed the door open and slipped inside, closing it quickly behind her. The ballroom was dark except for moonlight streaming through the tall windows. It painted everything in shades of silver and shadow. And there, In the center of the stage, the Steinway grand piano waited like it had been expecting her. Elena's legs felt weak as she walked down the center aisle between empty chairs. Each step brought back memories she'd buried so deep she'd almost convinced herself they weren't real. Her first piano lesson at age 5, her mother's proud tears at her first recital, the years of practice, 8 hours a day until her fingers bled, the competitions, the concerts, the standing ovations, and then the crash, the hospital, the funerals, the silence that followed. She climbed the steps to the stage, her breath coming fast and shallow. Up close, the piano was even more beautiful. The wood gleamed in the moonlight. She could see her reflection in its polished surface, distorted and ghostly. Elena pulled out the bench and sat down. Her hands hovered over the keys, shaking. What if she'd forgotten how? What if 15 years had erased everything she'd once been? Just one note, she whispered to herself. Just a C. She pressed middle C. The sound rang out pure and clear, filling the empty ballroom. It was perfectly in tune. The note seemed to hang in the air forever, and Elena felt something crack open inside her chest. A dam breaking. A door opening. Before she could think, before she could talk herself out of it, her hands found their positions and she began to play. Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. The piece that had made her famous at 23. The piece she'd been scheduled to perform the night of the accident. The concert she never made it to. The first notes came out stiff and uncertain. Her fingers stumbled over passages that had once been effortless. But then muscle memory took over. Her hands remembered what her mind had tried to forget. The music poured out of her like water from a broken pipe, everything she'd held back for 15 years suddenly flooding free. She played the opening with its heavy, somber chords. Her damaged hands protested, the joints aching, but she pushed through. The melody climbed and fell, built and released. She played the tender second movement and tears started streaming down her face. She could see her daughter's face, her husband's smile, the life she'd lost, but she didn't stop. She played through the pain, through the memories, through everything. The music swelled around her, filling the ballroom with sound that seemed to come from somewhere beyond herself. Her fingers flew across the keys, finding the speed and precision she thought she'd lost. The final movement built to its triumphant conclusion, and Elena played the last crashing chords with everything she had left. The final note faded into silence. Elena sat frozen at the piano, her hands still resting on the keys, her whole body shaking. She was sobbing now, deep, gasping sobs that came from somewhere so deep inside her she didn't know it existed. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the piano, to her past, to everyone she'd lost. "I'm so sorry I stopped playing. I'm sorry I ran away. I'm sorry." She didn't know how long she sat there crying. It felt like hours. When the tears finally slowed, she felt empty and exhausted and somehow lighter than she'd felt in years. Elena wiped her face with her sleeve and stood up carefully. Her legs were unsteady. She closed the piano lid gently, running her hand across the smooth wood one last time. "Thank you," she said softly. She walked off the stage and back up the aisle, her footsteps still silent. At the door, she paused and looked back one more time at the piano sitting in the moonlight. Then she slipped out into the hallway and locked the door behind her. What Elena didn't know was that she hadn't been alone. In his office on the 3rd floor, Vincent Thornberry had been reviewing security footage. He did this sometimes when he couldn't sleep, checking on his hotel, making sure everything was running smoothly. He'd noticed Elena on the 2nd floor camera earlier, standing outside the ballroom door. He'd been curious why a maid would be there so late. He'd switched to the ballroom's interior camera just as she'd sat down at the piano. For the next 20 minutes, Vincent had sat frozen at his desk, watching this tired cleaning woman play one of the most difficult pieces in the piano repertoire, with a skill and emotion that left him breathless. He'd grown up around music. His mother had been a concert violinist. He knew talent when he heard it. This wasn't just talent. This was genius. When Elena finished and broke down crying, Vincent had felt his own eyes burning with tears. There was a story here. A mystery. Who was this woman? Why was she working as a maid in his hotel? And why did she play like someone who'd lost everything? He'd grabbed his phone and recorded the last few minutes of her performance from the security monitor. The quality wasn't perfect, but it was enough. You could hear the emotion in every note. You could see her bent over the piano, pouring her heart out. Vincent sat back in his chair, his mind racing. He opened his laptop and started searching. He typed in keywords: female pianist, Rachmaninoff, disappeared. He scrolled through pages of results, looking at photographs of famous pianists from the past 20 years. And then he found it. An article from 15 years ago about a rising star pianist who'd vanished after a family tragedy. There was a photo with the article. A young woman in an elegant gown, her dark hair glossy, her face bright with joy. Vincent looked at the security footage frozen on his screen, showing Elena at the piano. Then back at the article, same nose, same distinctive cheekbones, same hands, though older now and worn. My God, he whispered. Elena Volkov. She'd been called the next great pianist of her generation. Critics had compared her to Martha Argerich, to Yuja Wang. She'd been scheduled to play with the London Symphony Orchestra when her husband and daughter had died in a car accident. After the funerals, she'd simply disappeared. No one had seen or heard from her since, until now. Until tonight, playing in his hotel ballroom at 2 a.m, thinking no one was watching. Vincent sat in his office until dawn, thinking. He watched the video over and over, each time discovering something new in her playing. By the time the sun came up, he'd made a decision. He had to help her. He had to find a way to bring her back. But he had to be careful. She'd been hiding for 15 years for a reason. Whatever he did, he couldn't force her. He couldn't expose her before she was ready. The hotel's annual charity gala was in 2 weeks. 500 guests, a live auction, entertainment. Last year, they'd raised over $2 million for children's hospitals. What if Elena played? What if he could convince her to perform just once in front of people again? Vincent picked up his phone and started making calls. He had a lot of work to do. The morning after Elena played the piano, she woke up feeling different. Her hands ached worse than usual, her fingers stiff and sore from movements they hadn't made in years, but inside something had shifted. The weight she'd been carrying felt lighter somehow, like playing had released some of the pressure that had been building for 15 years. She got ready for work, putting on her patched uniform. In the mirror, she looked the same as always. Gray hair pulled back, tired eyes, worn face. But she felt different, alive in a way she hadn't felt since before the accident. When Elena arrived at the hotel, Dorothy was waiting by the staff entrance with her arms crossed and a nasty smile on her face. Well, well, look who finally decided to show up, Dorothy said loudly, making sure other arriving staff could hear. Only 5 minutes late today. Should we give you a medal? Elena checked her watch. She was actually 3 minutes early, like always, but she didn't argue. She just nodded and tried to walk past. Dorothy stepped in front of her, blocking the way. You know what? I think you need a reminder of where you belong around here. She pulled something from her pocket. It was Elena's photograph, the one from her locker. The one showing her younger self on stage in a beautiful gown. Look at this, everyone, Dorothy announced, holding up the photo. Several staff members stopped to look. Our little ghost here thinks she's fancy. Keeps pictures of rich ladies in her locker and pretends that's her. Linda and Rose laughed on cue. A few other people snickered. Elena felt her face burning, but she kept her expression blank. That's sad, Rose said. Imagine being so pathetic you have to pretend to be someone else. Maybe she thinks if she stares at it long enough, she'll magically become a princess, Linda added. Dorothy waved the photo in Elena's face. This is what happens when you get old and desperate, girls. You start living in fantasies because your real life is so miserable. Elena looked at the photograph, at her younger self so full of hope and joy and talent. That woman felt like a stranger now. Someone from a dream she'd once had. Can I have that back, please? Elena asked quietly. Why? So you can keep pretending? Dorothy ripped the photo in half. Then in half again. The pieces fluttered to the ground like broken wings. There. Now you can stop living in fantasy land and accept what you really are. Just an old cleaning lady that nobody wants. Something cold settled in Elena's chest. She looked at the torn pieces of her past scattered on the ground, then at Dorothy's cruel smile. She bent down slowly and picked up the pieces one by one and put them in her pocket. Excuse me, she said, and walked past Dorothy into the hotel. Behind her, she heard them laughing, but their laughter seemed to come from very far away, like it couldn't quite reach her anymore. Elena went through her morning routine on autopilot. She cleaned rooms, scrubbed floors, changed sheets. Her hands moved automatically while her mind was somewhere else, thinking about the piano, about the music, about the feeling of playing again. At noon, she took her lunch and walked toward the ballroom. The door was unlocked. She went inside and sat in her usual chair at the back, eating her sandwich and staring at the piano on the stage. She'd played it. She'd actually played it. And her hands had remembered everything. Elena? She jumped and turned to see Mr. Thornberry standing in the doorway. The hotel owner. She'd never spoken to him directly before, only seen him walking through the lobby occasionally. "I'm sorry, sir," she said quickly, standing up. "I didn't know I wasn't supposed to be here. I'll leave." "No, please, sit." He walked into the ballroom, his footsteps echoing in the empty space. "I wanted to talk to you, actually." "Do you have a few minutes?" Elena's heart started racing. Did he know about last night? Had someone seen her? Was she about to lose her job? "I'm not in trouble, am I?" she asked. Vincent smiled gently. "No, nothing like that." He sat down in the chair next to her, which felt strange. "Owners didn't sit with cleaning staff." "I have a question for you. Do you play piano?" Elena's mouth went dry. No, I mean I used to. A long time ago. But not anymore, Moink, but you remember how?" She nodded slowly, not sure where this was going. Vincent pulled out his phone and showed her a video. Elena's stomach dropped. It was her. Last night. Playing the Rachmaninoff. The security camera had recorded everything. "I was reviewing footage and I saw this," Vincent said quietly. "Elena, I've been around music my entire life. My mother was a professional musician. I know what real talent sounds like. And this," he gestured at the phone, "this is extraordinary." Elena couldn't speak. She felt exposed, like someone had ripped away a mask she'd been wearing for 15 years. "I did some research," Vincent continued gently. "There was a pianist who disappeared 15 years ago. Elena Volkov. Same first name, same face, though younger. Same way of playing. That's you, isn't it?" Tears filled Elena's eyes. She wanted to deny it, to run away, but she was so tired of running. She nodded just barely. "Why are you here?" Vincent asked. "Why are you working as a maid when you could be playing in concert halls around the world?" "Because I can't," Elena whispered. "After they died, after my husband and my daughter, I couldn't play anymore. Every note reminded me of them. Music was our life together. How could I play without them? How could I stand on stage and pretend to feel joy when everything inside me was dead?" Vincent was quiet for a moment. "Is it still dead? After last night?" Elena thought about how it felt to play again. The pain, yes. But also the release, the sense of something locked inside her finally breaking free. "I don't know," she said honestly. "The hotel is having its annual charity gala in 2 weeks," Vincent said. "We raise money for children's hospitals. Last year we raised over $2 million. We usually hire entertainment, but this year I'd like to do something different." He looked at her directly. "I'd like you to play. Just one piece. Whatever you want." "No," Elena said immediately. "I can't, I'm not ready. I haven't played in front of people in 15 years. You played beautifully last night, that was different. I was alone. I thought no one was watching. Elena, there are children in hospitals who need help. Your daughter would have been about their age now, wouldn't she?" Vincent's voice was gentle but firm. "Play for them. Play for her memory. And if you do, I'll make a personal donation of $100,000 in your daughter's name." Elena felt like she couldn't breathe. $100,000? In Natasha's name. For sick children? "I can't," she said, but her voice was uncertain now. "You can," Vincent said. "I saw you play. You're still one of the best pianists alive. The world deserves to hear you again. And maybe," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "maybe you deserve to forgive yourself. To live again. To let music back into your life." "They'll recognize me," Elena said. "People will know who I am." "Would that be so terrible?" "You've been hiding for 15 years. Aren't you tired?" Elena thought about Dorothy and the torn photograph. About working herself to exhaustion every day. About being invisible, being nothing, being a ghost. About the music locked inside her that wanted so desperately to get out. She thought about Natasha, her little girl who had loved to sit and listen when Elena practiced. Who had clapped her hands and said, "More, Mama, more," after every piece. "If I say yes," Elena said slowly, "I have conditions." Vincent leaned forward. "Name them. I don't want publicity beforehand. No press releases, no announcements about who I am. Let people discover it themselves that night." And after the gala, I want time to decide what comes next. No pressure, no commitments. Just that one performance. Done, Vincent said immediately. He held out his hand. Do we have an agreement? Elena looked at his hand for a long moment. This was it. The moment where she either kept hiding or stepped back into the light. Where she either stayed a ghost or became real again. She thought she heard Natasha's voice in her head, small and clear. More, Mama. Elena reached out and shook Vincent's hand. Yes, she said. I'll play. The 2 weeks before the gala passed in a blur. Elena continued her cleaning job during the day, scrubbing floors and changing sheets while Dorothy and the others mocked her. But at night, after everyone left, Vincent led her into the ballroom to practice. Her fingers slowly remembered their strength. The stiffness faded. The music came back, note by note, like a language she'd thought she'd forgotten. She chose to play Chopin's Ballad No. 1. It was the piece she'd played at her daughter's first birthday party, dancing around the living room with baby Natasha in her arms while her husband laughed. It was full of light and darkness, joy and sorrow, everything she felt. The night of the gala arrived. Elena had never been so terrified in her life. Vincent had arranged for her to get ready in a private room. He'd bought her a simple black dress, elegant but not flashy. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. She'd washed the gray from her hair, revealing streaks of the dark brown underneath. Without her usual exhaustion weighing her down, she looked younger, more like the woman in that torn photograph. You look beautiful, Vincent said when he came to check on her. Are you ready? Elena's hands were shaking. I don't know if I can do this. Yes, you can. Just remember why you're playing. For the children. For Natasha. She nodded and took a deep breath. The ballroom was transformed. Crystal chandeliers blazed with light. Round tables covered in white linens filled the space where she usually ate her sandwich alone. 500 people in evening gowns and tuxedos mingled, drinking champagne and laughing. The wealthy elite of the city, here to donate money and be seen doing good. Elena watched from backstage, her heart pounding. She could see the staff working the event, serving drinks and appetizers. There was Dorothy in her server uniform, laughing with Linda and Rose as they carried trays. They had no idea what was about to happen. Vincent stepped onto the stage to welcome everyone. He talked about the charity, about the children they were helping, about how last year they'd raised $2 million. The crowd applauded politely. Tonight we have something special, Vincent said. A surprise performance by a truly extraordinary pianist. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our guest artist. He didn't say her name. Elena appreciated that. She wanted them to hear the music first before they knew who she was. She walked onto the stage on shaking legs. The lights were bright in her eyes, making it hard to see the audience clearly. But she could feel them watching, could hear the polite applause fading into curious silence. They were probably wondering who this unknown woman was. Elena sat at the Steinway. Her hands rested on the keys, and for one terrible moment her mind went completely blank. She couldn't remember how the piece started, couldn't remember anything at all. Then she closed her eyes and thought about Natasha's laugh, about her husband's smile, about music and love and loss and everything that had led her to this moment. And her hands remembered. The first notes of Chopin's Ballade flowed from the piano, soft and gentle like a lullaby. Elena forgot about the audience, forgot about Dorothy watching from the back, forgot about everything except the music. Her fingers danced across the keys, telling a story without words. The melody built and climbed, becoming more complex, more powerful. She played the dark middle section with all the grief she'd carried for 15 years. Then the music shifted again, becoming lighter, more hopeful, like sunlight breaking through clouds. Somewhere in the audience, someone gasped. She heard whispers starting. People were recognizing her playing style. Or maybe they recognized her face from old videos. But Elena didn't stop. She poured everything into the music. All her pain, her regret, her love, her hope. The ballroom disappeared, and there was only the piano and the notes and the story she was telling. The final section built to its dramatic conclusion. Her fingers flew across the keys faster and faster, the music swelling to fill the entire space. She played the last powerful chords, and then it was over. The final note hung in the air, and Elena sat frozen, her hands still on the keys, her eyes closed. Silence. Complete silence. Elena opened her eyes, terrified. Had she played badly? Had she forgotten something? Then the silence broke. One person started clapping, then another. Then the entire room erupted. Everyone was on their feet, applauding so loudly it sounded like thunder. Some people were crying. Others were shouting brava and more. Elena stood up slowly, her legs weak. She looked out at the audience at 500 people giving her a standing ovation. Her eyes found Dorothy at the back of the room. The head housekeeper stood frozen, her tray forgotten in her hands, her mouth open in shock. Linda and Rose looked just as stunned beside her. Elena allowed herself a small smile. Then she bowed. The applause went on and on. Vincent joined her on stage, his own eyes wet with tears. He hugged her, then turned to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, that was Elena Volkov," he announced. "One of the greatest pianists of our generation, who disappeared 15 years ago after a terrible tragedy. She's been here the entire time, working at this hotel, hiding her gift from the world. Tonight she played for you, for the children, and to honor her own daughter Natasha, who we lost too soon." The applause somehow grew even louder. People were pulling out their phones, recording, taking pictures. The secret was out. As Elena left the stage, reporters pushed forward with questions. Where had she been? Why had she stopped playing? Would she perform again? Vincent's security team held them back, giving her space to breathe. Backstage, Elena leaned against the wall, overwhelmed. It was done. She'd played in front of people again. She'd survived it. More than survived it, she'd felt alive doing it. Elena. She turned to see Dorothy standing there, her face pale. Linda and Rose hung back, looking uncomfortable. I had no idea. I'm so sorry. For everything. The things we said, the way we treated you. Elena looked at the woman who had made her life miserable for months. She could see the shame and embarrassment written on Dorothy's face. Part of her wanted to be angry, to tell Dorothy exactly how much she'd hurt her. But mostly she just felt tired. You treated me the way you did because you thought I was nobody, Elena said quietly. That I didn't matter. That I had no value. But I was someone the whole time. I just couldn't see it myself. She paused. The sad thing is, you only feel bad now because you found out I used to be famous. What about all the other cleaning staff? The ones who aren't secretly concert pianists? Don't they deserve respect too? Dorothy's face crumpled. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. She had no answer. I forgive you, Elena said, and meant it. But maybe think about that. She walked away, leaving Dorothy standing there. Over the next few days, Elena's performance went viral. Someone had recorded it and posted it online. Millions of people watched the video of the Maid who turned out to be a missing piano legend. Concert halls from around the world reached out with offers. Record companies wanted to sign her. Everyone wanted a piece of the comeback story. But Elena took her time. Vincent had kept his promise, letting her decide her own path. She gave interviews when she felt ready. She talked about grief, about loss, about finding your way back to the things you love. Her story resonated with people who had also lost themselves along the way. 3 months later, Elena gave her first full concert in 15 years. It was at a small venue, not one of the big concert halls. She played for children from the local hospital, the same ones the gala had raised money for. They sat in the front row, some in wheelchairs, some with IV poles beside them, all of them listening with wide eyes as she played. After the concert, a little girl approached her, maybe 6 years old, about the age Natasha would have been. That was so beautiful, the girl said shyly. Can you teach me to play like that? Elena knelt down to her level, tears in her eyes. I can try, she said. Would you like that? The girl nodded enthusiastically. Elena looked up at Vincent, who was watching from the side of the room with a proud smile. She thought about how far she'd come from that night she'd played alone in the empty ballroom, how she'd almost let grief and shame bury her alive, how one moment of courage had changed everything. She wasn't just Elena the ghost anymore. She wasn't just Elena the maid. She wasn't even just Elena Volkov, the famous pianist. She was all of those things. She was someone who had fallen and gotten back up. Someone who had lost everything and found herself again. Someone who had learned that you're never too broken to start over, never too lost to find your way home. And most importantly, she was someone who was finally, after 15 long years, ready to live again.